Hi everyone, I'm sorry I can't be here today, I'm travelling. I have an idea that I hope will appeal to some of you. I'd like to present it very briefly. I'll be back tomorrow, so feel free to ask me questions, I should be around. Here it is. And it's the idea of broadcast communication. In a broadcast communication, you have a single sender that sends out content to potentially many, more than one receiver. And we know broadcast communication from many different settings. The word comes from radio. We know that good old-fashioned radio broadcast is a broadcast in the sense of the word. There's also the notion of collection. And in a collection, you have the dual notion that you have many senders and a single receiver. And of course, we also know collection. Sometimes you have to get, say, radio frequencies from a great many mobile phones, and then you make all mobile phones in your network agree on a common frequency. So the central unit that does that performs collection. And both are modes of communication. It's either one-to-many or many-to-one. There are lots of interesting systems that involve both notions, or maybe one of them. Web services come to mind. In many web services there's a lot of broadcast and there's a lot of collection. In wireless communication networks you see both also. In chat service and many other very common distributed systems we have broadcast or collection, or maybe we even have both. And in the process calculus community, which is where I grew up and where I still live a lot of the time, there's quite a bit of work on understanding these modes of communication. I think it all began in 1987 with Prasad's work on CBS, the Calculus of Broadcast Systems. It's a CCS-like broadcast calculus. In 1999 there was interesting work by Ina Edmonton and two Romanian fellows on broadcast pi, which is a pi calculus like broadcast calculus. The pi calculus, that's a process calculus that descends from CCS and adds a very important feature that you have names of channels and names of scope. So there was a broadcast pi calculus, and in the years that followed there was quite a bit of work on broadcast calculi. Scott Smolka and his collaborators came up with the omega calculus. It's a notion of broadcast calculus that has communication within locations, so you have processes living on named locations. If you know the calculus of mobile ambience, this is slightly similar to that. Most recently, there's work by me and Nuno Pratas. He's from the Department of Electronic Systems, but this is computer science. We've been working on a calculus we call BBC. It's a calculus with broadcast and collection and notions of location. And there's probably a lot more out there. Much of this work does not dig very deeply into the subject. Very often it seems that the authors are content with saying, well, here is an interesting process calculus, here's the syntax, and here's the semantics, and look what we can do. There are many things that have not been looked at yet. In particular, there's very little work on types. One thing that we could do is we could distinguish between channels that we use for broadcast and channels that we use for collection. So here we have one way of using a channel. We could use A for broadcasting the number 7. In this case we would say that A had a broadcast type. There was a broadcast channel that could communicate integers. If we wanted to collect input from a set of sources and collect them in the set S and then do stuff with what we have in S, then we would probably say that D has type collection channel and it can collect integers. And what we could do is we could distinguish between two kinds of channels, channels used for broadcast and channels used for collection, but that's really way too restrictive because very often we would like to use the same channel in both ways. Suppose we wanted to have a channel A that we would first we would output 7 as a broadcast, and then we would on A first we would output and then we would put input and then continue as something else. What's the type of P? Well, one way of thinking about it is that A is a channel that can first be used to output, as in broadcast, and int, and then we could input, as in collection, and int, and then we could do something more. This notion of type is what's known in computer science as a session type. It's the protocol, if you will, that describes a session involving a specific channel. Session types are well understood, and I have worked on that, and I work on that. But it's not something that's been looked at into the setting of broadcast and collection. So I'm thinking it would be fun to look at types for broadcast and collection, maybe also session types, because maybe you can do something interesting with those, and I'm sure we can. In this problem setting, there's scope for lots of different projects you can look at. Something that's purely theoretical, you can do something that's implementation oriented also if you want. You could look at type checking or type inference, you can consider case studies. The sky's the limit, there's really a lot you can do, so plenty of scope for interesting projects in there. And I think many of these settings are reasonably easy to deal with, but there's not a whole lot that's been published about it, so there's definitely something interesting going on out there. So have a look at it. See you around.